Welcome everyone. My name is Rachel. My name is Rachel Gondo, and I am from the Public Service Accountability Monitor, PSAM, and it is an alliance member of the Kuyenda Collective. The Kuyenda Collective is made up of Stimulus Africa, PSAM, Global Integrity, Teach for Zimbabwe, SESC from Mozambique, FAWEMA, that's based in Malawi, and Policy Forum in Tanzania. So together we make up the alliance Kuyenda. Kuyenda means to go, means moving forward in Shona. And we as an alliance have come together to work on this project that's funded by EOL. And we are looking to move education forward by addressing the learning crisis through system strengthening. Now, as a project, we believe that I think one of the key things that has brought us together is the worsening situation regarding learning. Despite a number of increases across Africa, and in particular the SADC region, a number of increases in enrollment and young people entering into education, into the education system, there has been a regression in terms of learning outcomes. And as a project, we're looking to increase the voice and diversity of voices in transnational spaces, because we believe that a number of decisions around strengthening education systems happen at multiple levels, at the national level, and even at the global level and at the continental and regional level. So we are looking to promote and accelerate the presence of rural youth collectives and non-traditional actors, having them become more engaged at the transnational level, in the transnational spaces, to better shape education systems to respond to their felt needs when it comes to education. I have a number of colleagues from the Alliance in the meeting room. And why are we here? We are here as Kuyenda to launch our project. That's the first thing. But also, the second thing is we want to have this discussion with you esteemed colleagues on the call to help, to discuss the nature of the learning crisis in the different contexts we're working in. I will leave the description in terms of the context. I'll ask the Alliance members from Malawi, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique, sorry, to share what the learning crisis looks like in their context. So I think for now, this is an open discussion. Obviously, if you have any questions whilst one of the presenters is actually presenting, feel free to populate the chat with the questions, and I'll ask the panelists to respond to them, and any of the other Alliance members to just jump in response to any questions. And we look to actually have a robust discussion on the nature of the learning crisis, and whether and to what extent, the transnational spaces are receptive to the needs of young people, especially in disadvantaged areas, in rural areas, actually. So with this introduction, I would like to ask that speakers from the Alliance members prepare and get the ball rolling. Doc, you're the first one that I see on my screen. So I'm going to pose a question, And I'm going to allow for each of the country leads to respond to that question. And yeah, and then we'll take the conversation from there. If you can, please keep your video on, because we definitely want to be speaking to each other and not to the ghosts behind the screen. Yeah. Okay, over to you, Dr. Suela.
Rachel, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Rachel. I feel this is a very, very, very interesting topic. As the CEO of Teach for Zimbabwe, we are so privileged that we are working in the rural areas every single day, and we are really witnesses of what is happening there in the rural areas. And when we start talking about a learning crisis, the first thing that comes to my mind is, when did this learning crisis start? Is it something that just happened yesterday, or is it a decade? And in Zimbabwe, we realized that this learning crisis has actually been there before independence, and still we are still faced with that problem. But I think it's becoming even more serious now, because the whole world, I must say, the whole world except developing countries like Zimbabwe are actually living in the 19th century, when everybody else is living in the 20s, of the reason why we currently facing the learning crisis. Because if everything that is happening, if it's in terms of career, in terms of social activities, in terms of health, whatever is happening, we are using digital technology. Why is it that the majority of our people who happen to be staying in the rural areas, over 60%, are facing these different challenges? So I think for me, that's really where I want to start. Just explaining the context, where everything is starting from. So when we now look at, as an educator, I'm always talking about holistic education. And Zimbabwe, as you know, is well known academically, having 92% literacy rate. But at the end of the day, the learning outcomes are still poor. Why? Because the world is talking about digital literacy. So we have less than 30% of our people, especially the learners, who are actually waiting to prepare themselves for the outside world, and they are not digitally literate. So at the end of the day, all these other problems are coming, if it's where they are saying that geographical exclusion from whatever is happening is because of where they are staying, because of the nature of colonization, which of course I can say that is forming a foundation of what we are seeing today. So Rachel, for me, I think this is an absolutely wonderful topic. So we at Teach for Zimbabwe, we are addressing this educational inequity in the rural areas, and really coming face to face with those that are experiencing inequity, those that are experiencing crisis right from the classrooms. So I would like to stop there, but let's just discuss really that background of why we are here today. Why are we in the 19th century when everybody else is in the 21st century?
Thank you so much, Doc. I'd like to hand over to Ses.
Thanks, Rachel. Emma here from SESC in Mozambique. Yeah, here in Mozambique, the scenario is not dissimilar to that described in Zimbabwe. Unfortunately, we still have many large classes, many children sitting on the floor outside without even a classroom. And Since COVID, the number of hours of teaching has gone down. Even before COVID, it was one of the lowest in the region in Southern Africa. And so, you know, having 3 or 4 hours a day of lessons is not a sufficient foundation to provide a quality education and learning outcomes. And as a consequence, many parents are questioning the value of education. Is it worth sending my children to school? Or is it better for them to come and help me in my other businesses to help improve our livelihoods in other ways? Unfortunately, also children, there have been recent studies to show that not even 10% of children in grade 3 have the learning competencies that they should. So the foundation skills of literacy and numeracy are sorely lacking. And that's compounded by the fact that it's come from the today's teachers who are a product of this same education system. And it's also been studies have shown that the teachers themselves don't have necessarily all the competencies and skills that they should. And it's not just in terms of pedagogical competencies, but it's just that they themselves don't have the literacy and numeracy basics. So there's a lot of challenges. We have a very fast growing population. We may be meeting our goals as suggested earlier in terms of the number of percentage of children in school, or at least that start school when they should, but we are failing them because we can't provide them with the quality of learning that then they can become you know, adults with the competencies they need to help Mozambique develop and the region and beyond. Thanks, I'll stop for now.
Thanks, Emma. I think I'll hand over to a colleague from FAWEMA.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Unfortunately, I'm having problems with my video, so you can't see me. I hope that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Patso. Okay, I'm Patso Gabalamula, the programs manager here at FAWEMA. I'm standing in behalf of Wesley. Unfortunately, he's also in another meeting, so he can't join this one. But just to agree with the two colleagues, Dr. Suela and Emma, on the learning crisis, I think just to start in Malawi, some of the problems or the challenges that we are experiencing in terms of the teaching and learning materials, that they are not inadequate. So you agree with me that if we send our learners to school, we expect that they should find adequate teaching and learning materials. But that is a challenge here in Malawi as a country. For example, the textbook pupil ratio for the grade 1 learners is at 3 textbooks to 8 learners. So you can imagine that that is on a higher side as well, that we expect the learners to be sharing the textbooks. And also the situation is that they are not even allowed to take these textbooks home so that maybe they can be practicing when they are in their homes. They're only supposed to use the learning that subject. Another challenge that I also want to highlight is about infrastructure, that we don't have adequate infrastructure in the country. Most of the learners, more especially in the rural areas, they sit under the trees. And there's a lot of disturbance when learners are outside. You know, there are people going around. So it's difficult even for them to concentrate in their learning. So that is also another challenge that we have. But apart from that, I also want to talk about the low transitional rates. Low transitional rates, we have got higher learners in primary schools. When they finish grade 8, for them to transition to high school, to secondary school, the numbers are very low because we have got low secondary schools. For example, in 2020, the transition rate was 6%. So this is on a lower side. You imagine where were the other 60-something%? Where did they go? That means they didn't even have a chance to get into the secondary schools. So they dropped out at that high level. So that is also a challenge that we have. Apart from that, we are also having high repetition rates. You agree with me, Dr. Swela talked about COVID. That also affected us in the sense that in 2020, we registered a lot of learners that are repeating in the same grade because of COVID. Here we had schools were closed for close to 7 months. So that disturbed the learning. And the end result was we're experiencing high repetition rates, which is also expensive for us, like for a country to factor in that. So I think for now I can stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mpato. To you, Policy Forum.
Thank you, Lecho. It's Richard here from Policy Forum. I'm not a ghost, so bear with me if I'm not showing the video. I think the case is the same with the three previous speakers, but just to add on both before colonialism and after independence, we had a problem of the language. For Tanzania, actually, pre to primary education, they are using the Swahili. That's the first national language here in Tanzania. And to secondary school up to tertiary education, they are using the English as the means of instruction in the school. So this becomes a challenge once actually those who are coming from the primary school to reach the secondary school. That's the challenge it becomes, because previously they were using the Swahili, but the Swahili as a means of instruction. But once they are attaining the secondary school, they are facing the English as a means of instruction. So it becomes a challenge, especially during the exam and understanding the teacher in the class. For the same on the COVID, I think my colleague from Malawi put it clearly. COVID was also a challenge for us, especially for those geographically and the digital exclusion of the rural youth, because during that, the government instructed it to use the digital learning, but this was not the case for the rural area because of the challenge of the digital. But I'll talk briefly also on the teachers' capacity and the poorly resourced and equipped school to facilitate that's affecting both the access and learning while they're in school. This is because of the limited capacity of teachers caused actually by the inadequate training deliveries, which they are facing, especially in the rural areas. But it also the challenge of the teachers' retention, especially in the disadvantageous area like the rural areas, because most of we found that there is a lot of teachers actually they are quitting their job and joining other issues that actually give them the payment that they can survive their life. So majority of the teachers actually it's not easy to go to the very remote areas, especially the rural areas, and that's where we get a very inadequate and or scarcity of the teachers to be allocated in the rural areas. Maybe lastly, touching a little bit on the same case of the teachers' capacity. It also is lacking on oversight, because for us in Tanzania, actually we have the local government authorities, which they also have the full council. That's an oversight body at the actually the local government areas. So because the inadequate or lack of an oversight at that area, you find that they are not receiving the report, and there is a disconnection between the local government authorities and then actually the central government. So actually that's what I want to add, but I think the same case is similar with the three colleagues who are from Malawi, Mozambique, I think, and Zimbabwe, Zambia, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I think, thank you so much for the inputs from the four speakers. I just have one question that's just lingering. And that speaks to, is there actually a gender dimension to the learning crisis as it's manifesting in your context? So maybe if I can have one or two speakers to that question, and then I can open it up. I see there are no questions in the chat, but yeah.
Hi, Rachel. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Togo. Hi.
Yes. Okay, I want to share my video. Thank you. There's obviously a gender dimension to that, because usually girls do not perform very well. I'll talk for the case of our country, Malawi, where girls' performance is very low. So we're talking about the rural youth, and the education outcomes for the rural youth, when we talk of girls, it's even worse as compared to boys, because I'll talk of the issue of long distances to schools. Basically in Malawi, distance from one school to the other, there's long distances. Some schools, it takes up to even 10 kilometers, and it's very bad for secondary schools. So there's always an issue of safety for the girls, because they have to travel every day, and along the way they meet a lot of challenges. There's violence. They are enticed by men, and usually parents to the girls, they are not even willing to bear the financial burden of providing transportation for the girls. So there's that challenge there, and the issue of teen pregnancies and child marriages also contributes to that. In rural areas, in the rural setups, there's the girls have inadequate information to SRHR, and as well access to the SRHR services. So with all the challenges that they are facing, they are prone to teenage pregnancies and child marriages, and those contribute to their performance and overall education outcomes at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Togo. Is there?
Can I come in, Rachel?
Yeah, okay.
Who's coming in?
I just want Mpatso here. Sorry.
Okay, definitely.
I just want
Sean,
to add to what Togo has said about the long distance, that it has a disadvantage on the girl child. So what happens is that because of the long distances, so most of the parents resort to have the girls rent an accommodation somewhere closer to the school. So they engage themselves in safe boarding. So these what we call safe boardings are not even safe for the girls. So they're prone to a lot of challenges, a lot of difficulties. So that also has a bearing in terms of the learning outcomes. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Mpatso. I think, Richard, your hand is up. You wanted to come in?
Yeah, our case is also similar, I think, to many countries in Africa. To us, I think the major problem in the pastoralist community, where actually due to their cultural behavior, they don't take girls to school because of the nature of the nature of their society, actually their community. But we came also to realize now, because my colleagues are talking about taking girls to school, but now we have a challenge also to boys, actually, especially in the rural areas. Now we have a challenge of many boys actually who are involved in the business of the motorcycle. We call it boda boda. I see on the meeting the colleague from Uganda. We borrowed that name from Uganda because Uganda, I think in East Africa, the one who started with this business. Yes. So many boys actually they actually sell their land and buy a motorcycle, then migrate to the township or in the city because they want to do this business of the motorcycle. It's very popular here in Tanzania, and actually also in many other countries in Africa. So now they have a shift, even not only for the girls, even the boys who don't want to continue with the school, involving this business of the motorcycle business. Then they migrate to urban areas. Then they start that kind of business, and they quit from school. So I want to also not only to look on the girls' side. Actually, historically, actually they have been affected compared to boys. But now there is that kind of shift of now boys quitting the school, buying the motorcycle. Actually, they sell their land. If they have to move to town areas, then they buy that motorcycle, then they migrate to town area and they start the business, quitting the school. So I want to add on the side of the boys actually, and not only for girls. Even the girls, it's the problem here, but now we also experience even boys now quitting the school and getting to business in town area or urban areas. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you so much, Richard. Dr. Siwela, you can come in.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rudo. I just don't know what's happening with my video.
It's okay. We can hear you.
From my side, I'm not even seeing my face. Yeah, but anyway, I think something very interesting that we have observed in our rural Zimbabwe is the need of the young ladies. You find that when for be told to go to farm, or the first person to be affected by the poverty in the family is the girl child. So the parents will end up selecting the boy child. And when there are floods at the school, they always find a way of actually navigating and getting to school, but the girls end up not even going to school whatsoever. And the distance, it makes it even worse. We know that because of the schools, we don't have enough schools in our country. So the distances, we are still 10 kilometers to their nearest school. And this makes them really drop out, because can you imagine, they wake up in the morning, they are doing chores, they have to make sure they clean up the dishes from the previous night, or they have to go and do certain clean up the yard and so forth, and then they have to walk. So you find a girl child is faced with that situation, and they don't have packed lunches, most of them, walking all these distances. And let's not forget the menstrual cycle. When girls are really facing that health situation, it means if they have to walk long distances, if they have to now face challenges of not having the menstrual pads and so forth, it means they drop out again. So this learning crisis is definitely affecting the young rural girl. And I'm happy that my colleagues mentioned also the situation of early marriages. You know, it's so rampant, you know, in our rural areas, that I'm so glad that our government has actually got a policy to say that it doesn't matter if you get pregnant, it doesn't mean you are no longer intelligent, you can still go back to school. And we are so excited about that policy. I think what it needs now is for us to go to the community, remove the stigma, and actually make sure that the parents, the caregivers are supporting this young girl to go back to school. Thanks a lot, Rudo.
Thank you, Doc. I think a lot of in the inputs from the speakers, as they were highlighting challenges that, you know, the education sectors are facing in their respective countries, I think we could pick out a number of, you know, some of drivers or factors that are contributing, you know, to worsening the situation. in the region. Others, some touched on the historical ties related to colonialism and how as well that historical tie has also affected, the language policy and how that's affecting how learning is happening. There's also a lack of oversight. I think the speaker touched on the lack of oversight in terms of how the system is functioning. And I think all of the speakers touched on the element of poverty and inequality as some of the reasons why, learning outcomes are not improving, and the fact that as well there's under-resourcing for the education system itself to respond equitably to the needs of young people, whether they be urban or in marginalized areas. David, Kobia, I see your hand. Would you want to come in before we have the second round of questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for this opportunity and organizing this meeting. For those I haven't met before, my name is Kobia David. As you can see, I am working with the EOL program at the Regional Management Unit here in Kampala with Oxfam IBIS as the Regional Education Advisor. And I'm excited to participate in this meeting purposely because you're discussing a topic that is quite central to the issues affecting education in Africa. Yeah, I've listened to the presentations from the speakers across the board, and basically what is emerging is that the learning crisis is manifesting across three key areas that I'm getting from the speakers. And as I speak, then we can see how do we focus on addressing those, the crisis along those lines. The first one actually that is emerging is related to access. The second one is related to quality, and the third one is related to outcomes. So you will find that all the issues that are coming out are pointing to a crisis in learning or the school or education processes of our children that touch on their ability to access school, whether it's distance to school, whether it's being molested on the road, quality, whether it's the issue of teachers in terms of the pedagogical processes used, the learning materials, and the outcomes as whether the skills and knowledge they acquire after a certain level are commensurate with the needs and demands of the environment within which they are living so that they become useful to the society. Mm-hmm. So then you will find that, of course, as we continue planning for implementation, our interventions need to focus on policy-related remedies. Mm-hmm. What policy-related remedies do we need to work on in order to influence the variables that will address the learning crisis? Of course, some of these variables would relate to the learning environment, and this learning environment is both tangible and intangible, not necessarily confined to the school vicinity. You would want to look at the issues relating to curriculum, the content, the process of how it's done, the pedagogy, and the learning experiences, whether they are pleasant or unpleasant. They might hate school, not because the school could be very well with all the learning materials, the teachers are good, but the learner experience with the school or going to school might make them hate school. So it is a broad issue of learning crisis. And of course, our interest as, of course, EOL is to focus on the policy-related solutions and ask ourselves, what policy gaps exist that we have this learning crisis? Is it because we have policies that do not address these problems? Or is it because we have policies, but the people who are supposed to implement these policies are not doing what they are supposed to do? And after identifying those issues, then our job is cut on the appropriate point of intervention so that we are able to fix these policy lacunas and have a systemic kind of approach to addressing the learning crisis instead of having an issue-based, an incident-based intervention where we address the incidents in the villages or in the rural areas without addressing the systemic and structural issues that are more sustainable. So that is what I can say for now. And thank you so much for coming with this discussion. I would want to be part of this discussion going forward as we continue with this exciting project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kobia. Thank you for your inputs. And I think one of a key pillar within our project is applying a systems lens to trying to unpack some of the root causes of, the poor learning outcomes. So we are adopting a systems approach to engaging with the learning crisis. And as a project, we've also been going through a process of mapping, trying to understand the nature of the crisis in our different contexts, but also acknowledging that education systems are made up of actors, many different actors and stakeholders that may have to work, collectively or individually to make the system work to produce the kind of outputs and outcomes it is meant to. So with that in mind, I'd like to pose it to the country leads and of course the transnational leads within the alliance, Stimulus and PSAM. Why it's important? Why is it important for the project to improve the ability of rural youth collectives to engage in transnational spaces? Why the transnational spaces? Why is it important to include their voices in those spaces? And what link will this have in terms of the enabling environment for positive learning outcomes? I am going to, yay, McLeod. Thank you, McLeod from Stimulus.
Thanks, Rachel. And thanks. I'm glad I'm coming after David because I think he's framed it quite nicely in terms of the overall approach and the helicopter view in terms of then how we want to seek to influence policy, because ultimately what we're doing as an alliance, and glad we have all these guests, is we would also like you to confirm and so that it's not confirmation bias of having talked in rooms over months and months that we think the problem is or as we framed it. But I think David has done nicely to bring in the policy angle. We ultimately want to advocate. So for us, it's very much an advocacy project. Rachel, you've gone down from what David mentioned to the systems. But something that's really been important for us as the Alliance is how then the system is made of people. So within that systems thinking, we've also got a layer there where we're doing everything and focusing on humans. So the human-centered design element is very important. In fact, a whole leg of our project is going to be talking to people on the ground. The Alliance partners have been busy mapping their ecosystems within the countries to see what humans, if I can call it that, we need to speak to, because policy is made by people. So David, just to piggyback off your point there, we want to get down to the ground and also speak to the people that make up the system, because we feel that's very, very important. So I thought that would be maybe a little bit of extra context in terms of how we then seek to address it on the ground. Thanks.
Thank you, McLeod. Can we have inputs from the country leads?
Yes, Rodo.
Yes, Doc, you can go ahead.
I also want to second what McLeod said, that it's very important to acknowledge what David said about policy, bringing policy-related solutions. And I'm a big supporter of policies that actually acknowledge, as you said, Rudo, that there are different actors that needs to look at this very complex problem. I always find that when people are talking about policies, these policies are only geared to one stakeholder. And yet we know that there are different stakeholders. Our proverb is, it takes a village to educate a child. So if we have these 5 villages, the international community, the transnational, the national, the communities, the families, the question is, what policies do we have to ensure that there is an equal participation of all? Then we will recognize that one party is not able to do this. Let's see what the other parties can do. And I'm so excited with this project. I think it's really recognizing that we need to come to the party, because if we are saying from Zimbabwe's position, for instance, since 1980, we've had all these international organizations, we've had the transnationals, we've had the government, but still there is a crisis, there is a problem. Why is there a problem when all these parties have been there? So I guess what McLeod is pointing to now is that we really need to recognize that we need to bring in those who are being affected by these learning crises, the rural people, the rural learners, who constitute the majority of the learners. I was reading the other day where I think it's from UNICEF, saying that over 73% of our young people are staying in the rural areas. So if we are not involving them so that we can see what are our different strengths as transnationals, as CSOs, as parents, what are our different strengths, and work together collectively. I guess that's the secret we are missing here in Africa, because believe me, the whole world, especially developing countries, they have the private sectors coming in on the physical development or psychosocial development of a child. Then you have others coming in on the moral aspect. Then you have others coming in on the academic. Then you have others coming in on all these different areas. But the question is, why are we relying on one particular stakeholder? So our policies, I agree with you, David. Let's have policies which involves everyone, so that when we are now assessing, when we are evaluating the performances, these evaluations should be geared or focused on all of us, not just one party. Thanks a lot, Rachel.
Thank you, Doc. Emma, would you want to come in next?
Yes,
Speaking
thank you.
to the transnational space.
Yes, thanks. I also think it's important that I agree with everything that has been said that's gone before me, but just to add, is that as we've said, the people who are suffering most from the learning crisis are in the rural area, and they are obviously the young people. And so if they are finally involved, because they haven't really been involved until now, you know, always someone speaking on behalf of, but we're not actually hearing their voices. And I think they are probably going to challenge a lot of the assumptions on which policies are constructed. And that is the hope, that they will bring the reality, the underlying political economy causes that affect them, that they live every day, to this table. And we need a diversity of voices. As we said, we need a diversity of solutions. And if we limit the voices at the table, then we're only going to have a limited number of solutions. So for us, it's really important to get those who are most affected, who have little or no access to technology, who have been deprived during their educational experience, or are currently being facing a lot of challenges. It's really important for progress that their voices also heard. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Emma. Colleagues from FAWEMA Policy Forum, would you want to come in?
Yeah, I think from us, I just also want to agree with what the others have said, that the youth are in majority. I think in every country in sub-Saharan Africa, we know that the youth are always there in majority. So we need to hear from them the challenges that they are going through. So it's good to bring them on the table, unlike maybe just having decision makers at the table without hearing from the youth themselves. What is it that they are going through? Yeah.
Thanks, Mphatso. Richard?
Yes, I think I like the idea of Emma speaking on behalf of others. I think we need to take the affected people to speak for themselves. I will give an example. For instance, here in Tanzania, we had the government received almost $1 trillion of Tanzanian shillings just for to finance the education sector, and still the previous regime. They from nowhere, it's not in the policy, it's not even the ruling party manifesto, that if a child gets pregnant, then after delivery, she's not supposed to go back to school, especially in the education, formal education system. So if you take this affected student or children to meet with these transnational spaces, and increase their voices, that no, maybe we should not give the money to our government, because if we get pregnant, then after delivery, we are not supposed to go back to school, especially to the formal education system. So I think taking the affected people themselves to talk and air their voice themselves, that's, I think there will be some kind of impact, instead of just the policymaker or the decision makers meeting in these transnational spaces, and actually for their political gain or political whatever, then they are not thinking for their children, especially the girls. After getting delivering, then they should go back to school. That will make sense, instead of just taking the politician in a meeting here to meet this kind of at this kind of transnational spaces. So to increase the voice of the affected people, the affected kids themselves, to the transnational spaces, I think will make improving the situation, especially the initial policies and whatever. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I see a hand from Dr. Kujeke.
Yes, good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon.
Yes, I'm Dr. Elisha Kujeke from Zimbabwe, the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education. And the area which we focus on is mostly non-formal education, which is more to do with out-of-school learners. But here in Zimbabwe, I really appreciate the role that is being played by Teach for Zimbabwe, which is actually championed by Dr. Suela, that it has made significant contributions in identifying these gaps. I would like to agree in total with those who have realized and said policy dimensions should actually guide the way we do things. But all the same, there is lack of data or information which has been processed in most marginalized communities. And that is the essence in which we expect that this program, I don't want to call it a project, because if it is a program, it should actually have some lifespan and sustainability. There's a colleague who was talking from Tanzania, I think, where he said pregnant girls are not readmitted into school. In Zimbabwe, the educational policy itself, it has got that provision that they've got to come to school, coming back to school. But you know, people as they are, the low esteem that this girl after delivery will feel in integrating with the cohort is a real challenge. Therefore, in our department, for example, especially when we assist and work with Teach for Zimbabwe, is we actually look at those gaps and say, okay, how best can we reach out to the most marginalized? So we are saying there should be use of low technology, low cost, which can actually be accessible without the barriers of network, barriers of electricity, and so on.
Yes.
We should also try to increase reading material,
Mhm.
like the Odell or open and distance learning material, which might not be very costly, so that people have got something to hang on to. I've heard some contributions which are actually coming in terms of either monies or whatever is being done. I think critical projects which have lifespan, lifelong projects can actually have greater influence in the communities.
Yeah.
And I would like to believe that there has been a lot of inroads, especially from Teach Zimbabwe, the schools that they have actually engaged, the people who are actually there as champion leaders. If we could have a lot of these other things in most of our southern countries, I really would like to appreciate. And lastly, most probably, the issue of the planning process and the systemic approach, which was mentioned. I don't know whether it's McLeod or Kobia, but it is really critical because within all our planning processes, our evaluation mode, how do we measure? How do we judge? And remember, most marginalized people are labeled by society. Therefore, we should remove their self-esteem. Otherwise, this is quite a lively grouping of countries and grouping of the intended project. Thank you very much, Rachel.
Thank you, Dr. Kujeke, and also thank you for speaking life into our project. It will definitely become a program. Thank you so much for seeing the value in engaging with systems and also highlighting the key issue related to information and how, you know, a lack of information, especially speaking to the needs of rural young people, and how that information, the lack of that information actually skews policy responses. So as the project is aiming to actually bring in these voices at the national and at the transnational level to make those policies better respond and align to their needs. We're nearing the end. We're actually at the end of our webinar, and I definitely want to leave room for the Alliance members to give some closing remarks. Yeah, I'll start with Emma.
Thank you. I don't really have a lot to say. It's been very interesting, and although it's a kickoff meeting, it's also been a learning meeting, at least for me and for us at SESC. So yes, well, you know, we are fully committed and hope to bring these voices that have been stated and to bring the data and the evidence to the policy discussions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Pato, would you want to give the closing remarks on behalf of OEMA?
Yes, I think just to thank you, colleagues, I think, for organizing this, and also maybe to thank the partners that have joined. More especially, I've seen our officers from the Ministry of Education here in Malawi. They've also joined, so just to thank them for making it to this meeting. And as for OEMA, we are looking forward to start the implementation of this project and to come with results, as Emma has said, with the evidence, and to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mphatso. Richard?
Thank you. I don't also have much to say, but thank you guys for organizing this webinar. It was a very short time, but very rich in a discussion. And I've learned a lot about the discussion, what was going on. So wishing you guys will be meeting in Nairobi. I think we can continue this debate and come up with a report that will be very informative, especially during our implementation of the project at our localities. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Dr. Siwela?
Yes, Rachel, I just want to thank you so much for this webinar. And I think it's actually showing that we are recognizing the importance of our young people as the future generation. These are our future leaders. And coming together to try and find solutions to a very important topic that can affect their future leadership. We want to applaud that. So we at Teach for Zimbabwe, we are so excited. The next 3 years, collaborating with everyone to make sure that we do find a solution. At last, let's find a solution so that we cannot continue talking about the same thing before independence and after independence. I know that will be very painful, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. I think we should thank all of us because we made the conversation what it became. I think one of the key takeaways from this meeting is that this was literally to just start the conversation, and we want to keep it going. And so as the Kuyenda Collective, if you want to contact us, the email address has already been shared in the chat. And most importantly, we're actually going to be having kickoff meetings in each of the countries that we are working in. That's Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Malawi, and Mozambique. And at these meetings, we humbly request that, you know, the supporters that have joined the conversation, it means you're interested in actually making the situation better than it is now, progressively. And you're also vested in trying to understand, you know, how can we actually improve the way our systems are working, such that we have good quality education and actually achieve, you know, some positive learning outcomes in future. I think with that, I would like to bring the webinar to an end. And thank you very much for joining the conversation. There were a lot of also inputs in the chat. And as the Alliance will also commit to look through those and include some of the questions and inputs around challenges and include that in as we go forward in implementing our project. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for joining, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you, everyone.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.